Researching a novel is difficult, especially when it's done right. A lot of people will say, and I think there is some truth to this, to write what you know. But if we all wrote just what we knew, we wouldn't grow as people, and our stories would be mostly based on what other people like us already know about. And so there is a point where an author has to, like Bilbo says, step outside your door. And if you don't keep your feet, you don't know where you're going to be swept off to. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. If you've ever searched Wikipedia, you can start typing in, 1700s musket, and then eventually be reading about Edward Pellew and his exploits on the high seas. There comes a point where we have to use our common experience to detail an uncommon one. Most of us haven't been to war, and most of us will never go to space. And young people haven't been old yet. But we are acquainted with our emotions, our feelings, and we know a lot of facts, and we can put those together in a respectful way to try to detail those more extreme experiences. A lot of us do know what it feels like to lose someone we care about, and a lot of us know what it feels like to feel hopeless or trapped. We've felt lonely. We've also felt, exuberant, and we've had things inspire us to do things that even to this day we don't believe we ever did, or can't believe we could have done, but we did them. And we can use those experiences to give authenticity to things we may not have experienced in reality, but things we can understand, and to help other people understand. I personally like to write a lot of historical fantasy, and so that takes a great knowledge of history and things that actually did happen in our world. So a lot of times what's worked for me is to go and find somebody who has actually experienced what it was like. I met an old man, Mr. List. He was a lieutenant on a B-24 bomber in World War II, and he flew in the North Pacific he was one of the first who tried to drop bombs on Japan. He wasn't with Billy Mitchell, but just working his way across the ocean, and just his experience, telling about how the guns on the bomber would freeze, and they would have to be fighting off enemy Zero fighters with only half the guns on the plane. They would sometimes go to drop bombs, and the bomb bay doors would freeze partway open, and then they would have to scramble to stop the bombs from dropping, or that they would hit the doors that were, frozen in place. And I mean, those are a couple of experiences I never really thought about that, writing my historical books. But he experienced it. He told me about that, and he could still feel it. He was 90 years old, but it was like he was back there in that airplane, and we were back there with him. It was incredible. And sometimes, though, there are periods back in history, even World War II is starting to become one of those periods where we can't go and meet people who experienced that firsthand. But we can go to the places where it happened. I've written stories about the Civil War. In fact, that's one of my next works in progress, if I can help it. And I've always been a big Civil War buff, but I never quite comprehended the courage that it would take to stand in those lines and fire those rifles until I went to the Battle of Sharpsburg. And that is an incredible experience, and I would highly recommend it. The big theme of this video is going to be about how, yes, it takes a lot to research for the novel, but a lot of the times the payout of doing that research is a reward in itself. Even beyond the knowledge that you gain, just going there and experiencing things, listening to these stories, and just putting yourself in the shoes of people who have done incredible things, that is its own reward, and it's worth the effort to go and do it. At the Battle of Sharpsburg, there's a segment of it that's known as Burnside's Bridge, and it's not much longer than a single-lane road going over a river, and that is where General Burnside fed his troops essentially piecemeal to the Confederate forces. And you read the history books, and it doesn't really reflect that. You read about how several regiments of Union soldiers, far outnumbering the Confederate defenders on the other side, marched across this bridge, and by the end of the day, the Confederates were out of ammunition, and the Union had taken the other side, and they were only driven back by General Jackson, who came from 20 miles away at Harper's Ferry, going into a lot of detail here. But the crux of it is that when you read the history books, it looks like it was actually a wash for the Union in a lot of the ways people describe it, getting across that bridge. But again, when you're actually there and you realize that this was this narrow bridge, and you look at where the Confederates, they were Georgians, were up on this hill, about 30 feet higher than where the Union guys were marching, and you realize they didn't run out of bullets because they were low on ammunition. They spent all those bullets on the Union soldiers, and they were throwing down rocks because they had such a great position to throw those rocks down. And again, I started talking about how Burnside pretty much fed these soldiers to the Confederates piecemeal. He sent them down, small groups, and the Georgians just wasted them. And it's a miracle that they ever made it across. And then by the time they made it across and Jackson came in, there was no chance that they were going to hold that ground. That's the true story. But even I can't really detail it the way that you can see it at the battlefield. So to go there and to realize that I don't know if I could have been one of the men who crossed that bridge. I don't think most people alive today could have been among that group. Forget peer pressure. You couldn't get me to take a rifle, one bullet in it before you got to reload for 20 seconds, and march in formation with a bunch of guys that you might barely know. The Union Army at that time, they were all fresh soldiers. They didn't know the guy standing next to them. To march in a row and in a line after you've just watched 3, maybe 4 different waves of guys just get absolutely mowed down. It's a visceral experience to go see it, and I don't believe in ghosts, but I swear you could see them when you were there. So yeah, go there. If you're researching something in history, talk to somebody who experienced it, like Mr. List, or go there and see where it happened. Of course, more than experiencing it, you do want to fill in your understanding of these things you're researching with details. And something you got to avoid there is to not use other people's work. And I've mentioned All Quiet on the Western Front a couple of times. When you're writing a war novel, don't just take excerpts from All Quiet on the Western Front.
Explosives and process.
Put in the time to hunt down those real facts. Wikipedia and Google, they're not really that good, but go ahead and, use them for what they're worth. Read books and get your own details and explain how you would feel about it. There's no need to use other people's works. In fact, you add value to it by giving a new perspective. And that perspective is important, so we need to take our perspective and we need to break it down into components that we can send to other people that they can understand. And that's one of the great blessings of writing, is that we can take our own thoughts, our own experiences, and put them forth in a way that other people relate to. And we can bind people together that way. And so this research, going back and meeting these people, interacting with them, going and seeing, where other people, fought and died in the case of Sharpsburg for things they believed in, it's a great way to bring people together and to share our perspectives with those experiences and to encourage others to do the same. What methods do you use to research your writing? Go ahead and leave that in the comments below. While you're down there, go ahead and leave a like or a dislike if you need to, and subscribe if you want to see more videos. Remember, God is good all the time, and I hope you guys are having a good day or night wherever you are. Bye-bye.